I'd like to welcome you out this morning. This beautiful Lord's Day morning, the last day of January. This year, it's already blowing by. More than likely, we'll have a new baby this month, and so it just seems kind of crazy that everything's going by. I'm glad to see each and every one of you. Glad that everybody could make it. Glad that everybody is in relatively good health. I'm happy to be here with you guys today. We're continuing on in our study in Revelation by being in Daniel. We talked a lot about it. I think for 2 weeks ago, we mentioned about the precipice of the weeks where we were, of the 70th week, and what that means, and how week in Daniel chapter 9 really means 7. And this was all brought upon by Revelation chapter 11 when we started going into the time schedules, where it start mentioning months and dates and things like that. And this is where a lot of things can get jumbled or confusing, or can be what's seemingly contradictory. There's a lot of things that people can say, oh, these are places where it doesn't match, and I think I have some decent explanations for some of those things. I believe in the inerrant work of Scripture. I believe the Bible is never contradictory. I think that it all makes sense. It's just in the way that we look at it that's the problem sometimes, or the way that the world interprets it that's the problem. So I think that there's a lot of things to be understood here. We talked about how the correlation from Daniel chapter 9, I believe like 3 weeks ago, in the beginning, that where Daniel was and where we need to be, and how he was on his face confessing. He was in the Word. He was reading Jeremiah, actually, and it's what got him to understand the Scripture. He was interpreting Scripture with Scripture. He was able to be where he was supposed to be. He was lifting up his worries, and that he knew that Israel wasn't what it was supposed to be. It wasn't doing what it was supposed to do, and he was praying for the mercy of the Lord. He was praying that God would abstain from the judgment that he knew was coming. He was praying for that what he knew was going to happen, or what he knew the consequences of Israel's attitude would be prolonged, or it would be set back, or it would just be passed over. And we know, of course, the answer was no. Maybe it was set back, maybe it was pushed back, but God basically answered his supplication with clarification. And that's an interesting thing to think about. It's an own study of its own. That, there we could do a whole study on prayer and how God answers prayer, and how people, or young Christians, or even just everybody believes that prayer is always a yes answer. And it's not. He might answer yes, he might answer no, he might answer with wait, he might answer with more information. He might just make you have more light. And that's something that we see here in chapter 9. He doesn't tell him yes or no. He basically says, well, it's going to happen, but here's more information than what you asked for, because you're in the proper state of mind. And so we see, as we go into that aspect of it, we've seen specifically in Revelation chapter 11 the mention of Numbers, specifically verse 3, and I'll read it for you. We don't have to turn there because we're going to stay mostly in Daniel. We'll flip through back and forth between Daniel and Revelation here a little bit, but we'll see that it starts talking about 1,260 days clothed in sackcloth. So we start seeing 1,260 days. We said 1,260 days. Mike, why is that important? Why is 1,260 days important? Why is that to me, to you, to Revelation, to... Why are we just now in Revelation getting time? Why are we just now in Revelation getting more information than we think that we need? I'm going to put that in quotes. Why are we just now getting extreme clarification on dates and Revelation at this point? Does anybody have an answer? That's my kind of a broad question. But what is the What is the importance of 1,260 days? 3.5 years according to the Jewish calendar, right? If you do it to 365, it's really 3.45, but the Jewish calendar is 360 days, what they did in the past, and it's 3.5 years. It's another thing, and again, I like to make this point, that Revelation is an inherent trial against the Israelites. This is Israel's judgment. And I hope that that's been clear. I hope that that's been very upfront, because pretty much all of it has a correlation to the Old Testament. Pretty much all of it has been a culmination of things talked about, and I think it'll be even more clear when we're talking in Daniel about how this is what's going to happen to Israel. This is Daniel's prayer for Israel, and this is God saying, this is what's going to happen to Israel. This is exactly what's going to happen to Israel. Now, the church, the believers, the non-Jews, I guess you could say the Gentiles is the broader term for that, but they are going to be part of it. But Revelation is for the Jews. Revelation is for them to read and say, because of the things we have done, this is our inability to do the things that we should have. This is the culmination of it. So we're going to be in Daniel chapter 9. We'll start reading. Again, we'll read, I believe, I'll start in verse, I think I'm trying to find a good spot, because we kind of covered the beginning of Daniel chapter 9 and the position in which Daniel was when he got this information. Let's stay in verse 19. Let's start in verse 19 and read to the end of the chapter. So Revelation chapter 9, verse 19, it says, O Lord, hear, O Lord, forgive, O Lord, hearken and do. Defer not for thine own sake, O my God. For thy city and thy people are called by thy name. And whiles I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin as the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God for the holy mountain of God, yea, while I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation. And he informed me, and talked with me, and said, O Daniel, I am now come forth to give thee skill and understanding. At the beginning of thy supplications the commandment came forth, and I am come to show thee, for thou art greatly beloved. Therefore understand the matter, and consider the vision. We see that here Daniel truthfully didn't understand what he was reading. He was asking for immediate deliverance of Israel when he should have been seeing the future ramifications of their actions. And we see the clarification. God brought him clarification. He said, hey, you need to understand what you've been praying for. Understand what's going to happen. It's a beautiful thing that we could talk a lot about, but I really want to get into the time schedules to try to help make it a little more understanding. It says in verse 24, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city. Finish the transgression, and to make an end of sins, and to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem, unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks, and 62 weeks the street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself, and the people of the Prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice, the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of the abominations he shall make it desolate, even unto the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. So we see here the mentions of Gabriel coming and explaining to him. And we see in verse 24, really there's a lot put in place here. These are the things that have to happen, right? There's I think 6 different things that said they have to happen in verse 24. Is to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, reconciliation for iniquity, everlasting righteousness, vision and prophecy, and to anoint. Actually 7 things to happen in verse 24. These are the things that are to come. And we see 70 weeks. So when we talk about weeks, I want to make sure that we all understand what we're talking about here. When it says 70 weeks, it means 70 sevens. And I can prove that to you biblically, that the Jews worked in a 7-year kind of calendar. It's according to their Jubilee, according to their... Yes, Dawn?
Like every 7th year, the land had to like...
Exactly, and that's found in Leviticus. So I wanted to make that clear that this is something that they understood, that the period of 7 years, 7 years, 7 years, and 77s is something that's mentioned before. You've definitely heard the period of 70 times 7 before, and that's an interesting study as well that has a deeper meaning, but we won't get into that. Maybe a little bit because I find it very interesting. But so we'll turn to, just real quickly, I want you to see that they work in this cycle in Leviticus, and I don't think I wrote it down, which is very like me. I think it's Leviticus 23, I think. Don will find it before I do. But the portion of Scripture talks about how the Jewish calendar works and how they go with into the Jubilee and the period of 7 sevens, and saying that you're going to have 7 and 7 years. So that when it talks about weeks, Leviticus 25, I believe so.
25:8.
Yes.
22, the only thing I see about 7 was we putting in animals and sacrifice.
It's 25. I was wrong about 22.
No, that's okay. I was thinking that was the only thing.
I appreciate it. Thank you. So in Leviticus chapter 22 and verse 8, it says, "And thou shalt number 7 Sabbaths of years unto thee, and 7 times 7 years. And the space of the 7 Sabbaths of years shall be unto thee 49 years." And then they say on the 50th year, which is an important year for them, the Jubilee, and now they should not have to reproduce, that they take of the excess. And it's a beautiful concept that they didn't follow through on. For the most part. So just know that that's kind of how that they operate. The 7 and 7s, it's a period of time that they would use in their history. This is of historical context to them. Again, this shouldn't be completely out of the blue for you, because that's kind of how the rest of Revelation has been, that they have some sort of Jewish historical context that they would know. They would understand the importance of these 77s and saying, hey, these times are important. So that when they read in Revelation the period of 1,260 days that shows up in Daniel chapter 12, we'll see that a little bit, they would know what this means. They would say, oh, this is the culmination. This is the end. This directly correlates to Daniel. They would be able to sit here and say that we didn't do what we're supposed to do. So something we mentioned is we have the 7, when it says the weeks, it means a period of 7 years. So 70 times 7 is 490, right? I'm not trying to make you guys do too much math this morning, but we know that that's 490 years, supposedly. Like that's, 490 years is what they're supposed to happen. So it's separated into 3 different periods. It's 7 weeks, so 7 times 7 years, so 49 years. It's the first period of time. 7 weeks, right? It's the first period of time. Does anybody know how long the temple was to be built? How long it took the temple to be built from Ezra to Nehemiah? It's 49 years. It took 49 years for it to be built. So that was the first step. The 7 times 7, the 49, is the amount of the rebuilding of the temple that was supposed to form. This was supposed to be how it's supposed to follow along. This was how it's supposed to culminate. He was saying this is what the timeline is supposed to look like. So the rebuilding of the temple would correlate with, again, this is just kind of an aside, but an interesting concept. What's the most important part of the 49 years? It's the 50th. And you would have to realize that 50th year was supposed to be a celebration. right? That is supposed to be a wonderful, beautiful exalting of God and his promises to them. Right? That's the 50th year. They're supposed to take it and become and have this beautiful year-long celebration of who God is. And that didn't happen. They didn't do it. So we see the rebuilding of the temple come. We see the next part comes into 62 weeks. And we'll see that the next part is 62 weeks, which is 434 years. So we have the 49 years of the 7 sevens. We have the 434 years of the 62 weeks, which is 62 times 7. I'm trying to make sure that everybody follows along in math. That would be the 62 weeks. The Messiah, the Prince. Yeah, in 25 and 26. So we see the 7 sevens and 24. The 70 weeks are determined. So that's the entire 70 weeks to finish the transgression. And then it says in 62 weeks, right? That's 62 weeks, right? The 7 in verse 25 comes to 62 weeks. So that's the next 62 times 7 in that period. I'm sorry, thank you for making me go through that. The 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off. So from the estimated time from the ending of the building of the temple to the time when Christ died is about 434 years. And the historical context is it's pretty close. It's obviously we didn't keep exact dates and times, so I believe that this is correct because the Bible's telling me it is. But we have the 434 years from the ending of the building of the temple to the time when Christ dies and when he is cut off. And we see that this was the ending of this 483 years. If you take the first 7, the 49 times the 62 weeks, which is 434 years, you get 483 years, right? So that's 69 weeks because there's 7 years left, right? The 70th week is yet to come. And I can go through that one more time and try to make it a little more hard. It's hard with numbers. I'm not very good with numbers. So I kind of see it up here in the handout. It's on this page at the very top. It says, and again, I got this from Middletown Bible Church. That's right? I always mess up the name. Every time I try to Google it, I always mess up the name. So at the very top, you see that the 7 weeks, 49 years, and it says in Daniel 9, and that's, I'm not picking this out of nowhere, and this helps. It says the next 62 weeks, the 434 years, and then we see the cross right there, right? Because that's where we're stopping, right at that 483 years. The 7 weeks, the 62 weeks, and then we're coming into that leaves us at 69 weeks, right? We're right at the end. We're right at the precipice to be able to say we have the 69 weeks that are yet, the 70th week is yet to occur. And that's where we're on that precipice of. Does that make... Are you guys following me? I want to make sure that we're there. I know the people on the recording can't, but am I making good math sense? If it's okay if I'm not, because I want to make sure that, if I took the time to go through the numbers, I want that to be clear. Because weeks means years, or sevens. It's 7 sevens is what it means in the Hebrew. So when it says 62 sevens, it's 62 periods of 7 years. So we have this time left between, it comes from the ending of the temple, the building of the temple to the cross is where the 69th week leaves us.
The ending of the building of the temple?
Yeah, the building of the temple. Yeah, the beginning of the building of the temple to the cross is the 69 weeks. That we are on that precipice of saying, well, the 70th week should occur. So my question to you is, what happened? Why didn't the 70th week come? Why is there a period? Why is there a time period? Yes, Don?
Because this is when the gospel is being given to the Gentiles.
We see the pause. We see the church. The church is brought in. God turns from Israel and says, I'm going to give it to someone who will take it and eventually will not do what they're supposed to do as well. But he gives it to the Gentiles. He gives it to the church. So that's kind of, how do you say, like, waited or put on pause the 70th week. So we're seeing that the Jews are on the timeline waiting for the 70th week to occur. And so, can I give you a time when this is going to happen? Absolutely not. Can I give you the importance of the times that has already happened? Yes. Hopefully you'll be able to see that the weeks line up and that the gospel, or I mean the gift or the ability for the Jews to accept the gift ended at the cross. I hope that that's not too much of a statement. That's the 69th week. They were given that time. That's when they should have. Go ahead.
As a nation, because individual Jews are still coming to Christ.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm not saying individual Jews cannot come to Christ. I would not make that statement. Thank you for the clarification. I'm saying that's when their fate was sealed. When they killed the Messiah. Right? If that's too bold of a statement, let me know. But that's what it's telling me. That the 69th week, they have come to the precipice of the end times for them. So to think of why does it pause, it's because God took the timeline away from them. He did. If he basically said, you know what? I'm going to give it to the church. I'm going to let the church do what it's supposed to do. I'm going to establish the church. I'm going to put you on pause. This is something that I know that we've heard, and something like proverb, I guess you could say, or a principle that we've always heard of what's the worst thing that can happen to you as a Christian is be put on the shelf. This is what's happened to Israel. They've been placed on the shelf. They're waiting. They're waiting for things to occur. Now we know that the temple has to be rebuilt. We've talked about those things that need to happen, and that in Revelation chapter 11 we've seen the measurements happening, and that you would measure this but leave without, for the Gentiles have trod. Remember that it's been trod underfoot. So we know that there's things still yet to come, but they have to come to pass before the end times can happen. Right? These are things that need to happen. The temple is not built right now. The temple is not there. So we know that for me, I know it's not tomorrow. I can't tell you the day it's going to happen. I can't tell you as soon as the temple built it's going to happen. The temple could be built this next year and then it's still not happen for forever. I just know there's things that still need to occur. Or at least the planning has to occur.
Well, they're in the planning stages. They essentially have everything, materials. And it could be that the temple will be built essentially at the beginning of the tribulation period. But everything is in place for the temple to be built. The plans, the materials,
It's all there.
yeah, it's there.
And so we have this precipice to come to, of we're waiting. And so then he starts giving these mentions of times, and it's things that we're going to talk about a little bit more, and hopefully I can make them clear. So is everybody clear on the weeks, at least from the handout? The handout is great because you can actually see it. As it gives you that timeline of what's happening. The 69th year, the 69th week ends at the cross, and the 70th week is going to occur. It's going to happen. It's eventually going to happen. There's a lot of people who have fallen into the trap that this is in the past, that with the destruction of the temple with Titus and things, there's just a whole lot more that hasn't occurred that doesn't fall in. I of course believe Revelation is a prophetic book. So we see that we have the seventh week yet to come. And then that one is split into two portions of 3.5. And so that's when the 1,260 days comes in from Revelation. The 1,203 score days, and specifically. Yes, Don?
In verse 26, it says, when it says to be cut off, does that mean he was sacrificed?
I believe it's just essentially mentioning the cross. I think that that's what it's saying, that he's cut off, but not for himself. He gave up. He did what was supposed to be done.
Right. And the translation of that says shall have nothing. And then the explanation is nothing that is which was rightly his. So he was sacrificed, but not for himself.
Yeah, it's a very, well, I mean, if you think of what was supposed to happen, so like if you think of the perfect, what was supposed to happen was he comes, this is God's, I think, perfect plan, and I don't think that's crazy. I can look up the messages or the portions of Scripture that say he's supposed to come down, and the Jewish people were supposed to accept him as a Messiah, right? He was supposed to set up his kingdom, go forth. That was what was supposed to happen, and instead they killed him, right? And I think that that's probably an allusion to that this is what's going to happen. He's going to come, but you are not going to accept him. He's going to be cut off. So we're here at the precipice of the 7 weeks left, or the 70th week left, the 7 years left. All of those, the 1 week, the 7 years left. I have to be very careful with how I say things. I like to rush through how I talk. And we'll see that that's split even more, and this is actually mentioned a couple times in Revelation and Daniel, but we'll have to come to a close pretty quickly. But you'll see mentions of time, times, and a half of time. And that's time is 7 sevens, times multiplication of that, and a half of the time. So 3.5 years. So we see that it's mentioned before, and we'll talk more about it next week in Daniel 7, verse 25, and Daniel chapter 12, verse 7, and then it's mentioned in Revelation chapter 12, verse 14. And we'll go into that more, I believe, next week. But we'll see these times mentioned, and then we'll come to, I'll leave you on a little bit of a cliffhanger. We'll come to and I'm going to put this in quotes and understand what I say, we'll come to a contradiction. Right? I'm going to put that in big quotes of we've come to a contradiction that people could say, well, it's not the same. And I, of course, disagree. But if you look in Daniel chapter 12 and verse 11, it says something very particular. So Daniel chapter 12, and we'll get into Daniel chapter 12 as well, because it's kind of Daniel going to the end and saying, I don't understand this. And God just goes, you don't really have to, but I'm going to throw more numbers at you. And Daniel chapter 12 and verse 11, it says, and from the time of the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh the desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. So my question is, and I wonder if you guys can come up with an answer, because I do, but I want you to know. Why does it say 1,290 days in Daniel, but 1,260 days in Revelation? Is that the contradiction? Right? I've had lots of people say, well, this is where you can see the inaccuracies. Why does it say 1,260 days and 1,290? It's an interesting. What's that extra 30 days? But I have some explanations, and I have some reasonings, and I think it's very simple. I like to try to keep it simple. I try not to do it too convoluted. So I think that it will be clear, but I'm interested to hear if you guys come up with something next week. Not necessarily leaving you with, no, Don's already got it, but we have to wait for next week. Don, we got to wait till next week. Oh, okay. If it's a quick one, we can do it real quick.
And in verse 12, then they throw another one at you, 1,335.
Oh yeah, we'll get into that one too. There's 3 different portions of times that kind of all fall over each other, and you go, I don't know what this means. Good, because it's hard to understand, but we want to make it easy, and I think that it has explanations there. So hopefully it'll be more clear as we get that explained as we go forth. Greg, if you don't mind closing us in prayer today.